Welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast, the nature-based show hosted by me, Jack Perks. Each week I'm joined by a guest from the world of wildlife television, art and science. We take a light-hearted look into what makes these people tick and connect with the natural world so strongly, with new episodes out every Tuesday. Hello, how are we doing? Hope you're having a great morning, afternoon, midnight, whenever the hell you're listening to this. Now on today's show I've got Ben Burville, and by day he's a GP, and also by day he is an incredible scuba diver and camera op, particularly with grey seals. I'm making him sound like Batman, although he's not far off. Now Ben's work has extended so much with grey seals that he's probably got the biggest library of footage of anyone in Britain, and his encounters have gone viral online. You've probably seen videos of seals hugging Ben while he's scuba diving off the Farne Islands. He's a good mate of mine. We've dived together. He's an awesome guy. I can't wait to chat to him. However, before we start, I should just say that I was going to end on 100 podcasts, and I've actually worked out that I've got 101, which kind of displeases me slightly, but we'll keep going with it. This is because I'll let you into a bit of a behind the curtain of podcasting. I generally ask more people than I expect to say yes. So if I ask 10 people, I might only expect 4 to say yes. But I asked lots of people, and lots of people said yes. So I'm ending on 101. I could save that last podcast and release it later, but I think it makes sense. So I've got, what we're on now, I think this is 98. This is the 98th podcast. So there's 3 more to come. Got some great guests coming up, and 101. So yeah, not ending on 100. I did record the 100th podcast before, so I actually say goodbye in the 100th one, which I could change, but I can't be asked. But actually, there's going to be 101. So just to kind of clarify that. Now, as always, there's the link in the description to buymeacoffee.com, and you can help the podcast by donating £3. I don't want £1. Well, you can give me £1 if you want. I'd rather you give me £3. If you could also leave a review. I notice on Amazon, there are no reviews for the... Oh, I smacked my mic then, sorry. There are no reviews on Amazon. So if you could leave a review on Amazon, that would be amazing. I mean, it doesn't sell on Amazon, but they because of Audible, there are a possibility to review it. So if someone could review it on Amazon, that would be smashing. In today's show, myself and Ben talk about what he's discovered being in the water with these grey seals. Do these grey seals recognise him? And also some of the other species off the Northumberland coastline, such as the significant population of whitebeak dolphins. Here's our chat. So welcome to the podcast, Ben.
Thank you very much, Jack. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. How are you doing? Busy, I expect.
Yeah, general practice is a little bit crazy at the moment, but the diving sort of keeps me sane when I can get in the water.
It must be quite nice and serene for you, I guess, because obviously being a doctor at the minute is going to be pretty full on. So getting under the water and just switching off must be lovely.
Yeah, it is. To be honest, I as you know, I go underwater for a number of reasons. You know, for the science side, you know, for the challenge underwater, the physical challenge of diving in currents and things. For the filming, you know, to be able to do the filming. But the main reason why I go underwater, I think, certainly at the moment, is because of that mental health aspect. You know, being with wildlife, being with nature. I just think it is what helps keep me sort of sane at the moment.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Where did diving start for you?
Oh gosh, when I was small, you know, my parents were really good. I grew up in Plymouth originally as a kid. I was born in Plymouth, and you know, we would holiday all the time after we moved away from that area. So I was in the water a lot. And then I think as soon as you could dive in those days with the British Sub-Aqua Club, you couldn't train until you couldn't qualify till you were 16. So I think as soon as it hit my 16th birthday, I was down to the dive club, and my father and my mother, you know, I owe them a lot really, because they facilitated that. In those days, you spent about 6 months in the pool before they'd let you in the sea, you know, and you had to, it was quite vigorous training. And I had one of the first female diving instructors, Ingrid Dilk, she was called. So if you're listening, Ingrid, thank you very much. You know, so she really pushed me hard. You know, if everyone had to swim 2 lengths with a weight belt, she made me swim 4. In the long
Took
run,
a shine to you.
That was a bonus, really.
And what took you to so if you were based in Plymouth originally, what took you to the Farnes?
Well, I was based in Plymouth with my family when I was born, you know, and then my parents moved along with work, and then you know, I think really what moved us up to this area was 2 things. One is they've got a very, very good scheme for training GPs, and two, they have you got the Fun Islands, so there was definitely a significant draw there purely from the diving really as well.
So were you always interested in seals? Because I guess that's where most people, whether they've seen you on Country File or they see the stuff that you're doing on YouTube and these little clips on Twitter and whatnot, was it always seals for you, or was this sort of like seals are quite interesting?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I like marine mammals. I think there's something quite interesting about them. They're intelligent. They breathe air just the same as you and I do, and yet they function in an aquatic environment. And they're, I think there was something quite charming about marine mammals in a way that people find quite endearing. And it's always had an interest in that, and always had an interest in marine life and marine biology. And I was very lucky actually, because before I did medicine, I actually did a degree in sort of marine biology at Southampton.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so and I actually worked with dolphins for a while during that. So yeah, marine mammals across the board, but seals sort of were something that I migrated towards. And then for the last 20 odd years, have sort of observed and filmed and studied their behavior underwater.
Well, I guess they're quite dog-like as well, aren't they? And I don't know if you're a dog person, but naturally I tend to gravitate to things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think they have some similarities to dogs. And I can see why people look and think, oh, it's just like a Labrador. If you look genetically at them, their ancestry, they're a lot more related to bears actually than dogs.
Are they?
And you see that up close when you see their fins, their front flippers, and you see the claws on them and the way they articulate, and their mouths as well. So there's quite a link to do with bears. And I think if you look at the weight of the average weight of a male Labrador dog is about 34 kilograms. And the average weight of a male seal is about 220. So these are, different scale of animal, really. So they definitely warrant a huge amount of respect, and I think that's one of the key things, is not to disturb them and to treat them with the utmost respect, because they're quite formidable predators if they want to be. Yeah.
They're not really a danger to people, though, are they? They're more kind of curious, I guess.
No, I think they're not a danger to anyone if you treat them with respect.
Yeah, okay.
And you don't do anything stupid. So, I don't think you should ever approach them on the land.
No,
if anyone goes near them on the land, then they're going to get disturbed. They may get flushed, and there have been some incidents where seals have bitten people on the land when they've got too close. They also have some really very unpleasant bacteria in their mouths. So they have mycoplasma. They have a specific type of streptococcus in their mouth that's been isolated in their mouths. It's only found in grey seals. Well, it was initially isolated to grey seals. It's since been found in other animals. But if you get a bite from a seal, they tend to get pretty nasty infections. In the old days, you used to call it seal finger, and it needed to be amputated.
Right.
But the antibiotic that we would use with a dog bite would be coamoxiclav. And cat bites are more likely to get infected than a dog bite, but you can still treat them with coamoxiclav. Human bites are even more likely to get infected than dog or cat bites, but you can still treat them with coamoxiclav. But you get bitten by a seal, give someone coamoxiclav, and they can still have an infection. So probably because of the mycoplasma. But yeah, they have really nasty bites. So on the land, you definitely need to stay well away in the water. In the water, the thing is to let the seal come to you. If you go towards a seal in the water and it collars and it felt cornered, then yeah, they could be a danger to you. They certainly can rush you, and they could bite you. If one felt cornered, or you were near one when the cow seal was pregnant, again, that can often trigger reactions where you need to be very careful, because they're incredibly gentle animals, but at the same time, they're wild animals, and if they felt cornered or threatened, then they certainly have the assets to hurt you. If one bit you, it could bite straight through your hand. And interestingly, Jack, they have actually been recorded in the last number of years predating on porpoise, and a lot of people think, oh, cute little seals, but they can ambush another mammal and eat it and tear it to pieces actually.
Because a porpoise, I mean, they're not as big as people think, but that's still quite a big prey item, isn't it, for a seal to go?
Yeah, it's still a 35 kilogram plus animal, and it's also faster than a seal. A porpoise on average can swim faster than a seal. but it's mainly your bull seals, and they seem to target them when the porpoise comes to the surface to breathe, and then they ambush them from below, grab them with their front flippers, stick their claws in, bite them, pull them underwater and drown them.
Wow.
Because the seals can hold their breath longer than the porpoise.
Has that been witnessed?
Yes, it has. Yeah, it's been recorded. It's actually been seen off our coast as well. It's been recorded off Pembrokeshire. So if you just simply Google seal predation porpoise, that would probably bring it up. And the two researchers that were involved with it, Jan Holters and Mardik Leopold, they were the first people who actually proved that. They did some quite interesting DNA studies where they managed to extract DNA from the bite wounds on the porpoise to see that they were from grey seals, and they proved that. And they weren't post-mortem bites, they were fresh bites. But since then, it's actually been witnessed with them attacking a porpoise on the surface and pulling it under.
Wasn't there a mystery? I don't know if you know anything more about this, about seals being washed up dead, and they found out it was cannibalism. Is that right?
Yes. What you're referring to there is the infamous corkscrew injuries.
Yeah, that's right.
That was seen on seals, where a corkscrew, where basically their flesh and fur layer had unraveled like a corkscrew, like someone had sort of gone around an apple with an apple peeler and rolled it round. And initially, that was, in actual fact, the Sea Mammal Research Unit at St Andrews were commissioned to look into that. And their conclusion initially was it was probably ducted propellers on ships associated with wind farms, and the seals were getting caught in the ducted propellers, and it was ripping their skin and their fur off. And that was sort of accepted for a while. I was always a bit dubious, because if you ever see a seal in a very, very strong current, they have no problems in navigating through that water.
They can handle themselves.
They're incredibly well aligned. So the thought that they could be caught in a ducted propeller, it always seemed a little bit of a hard one for me to get my head around, that because of them being so adept underwater. And then it was up at the Isle of May some years ago now, where I think it was, I'm just trying to think who it was. I think it was some of the team from Durham University were there. And they saw a large male bull seal drown a number of pups and then eat them. And in the process of eating them, actually rip them in a way that their skin came off in this corkscrew pattern. And I think it has something to do with the underlying tissue on the body of a seal being sort of like a fibrous network that goes spirals around the body. So when it gets torn and the flesh is torn, it will spiral off the carcass in a sort of spiral way, looking like it's gone through some sort of twisting thing. But in actual fact, I think it's just due to the underlying fibrous sort of epidermis below the dermis level, where it rips off. Yeah. So it wasn't ducted propellers, it was cannibalism.
Yeah, which is crazy, isn't it? Because I know one of the other theories was it Greenland shark or some kind of weird shark, and
yeah, there was some sort about Greenland shark attacks. There has been a Greenland shark washed up off the coast of Northumberland.
Okay.
I think it's in the Natural History Museum in London at the still now. That was found on one of the beaches in Northumberland. And Greenland sharks, very, very long, they live to incredibly, very old. I think they're recorded over 300 years old. They can ambush seals as well.
Oh, so they do. So that's not like a fanciful thing. They could potentially take the odd one or something.
No, they do. They off certain parts of the world, like Newfoundland, then those Greenland sharks will ambush seals and kill them.
Wow, it's mental. Because I guess the Northumberland coast, you're not really getting sharks regularly, not like say Cornwall or Wales and places like that.
Well, I think the thing is, no one really knows. We've certainly, I haven't, but I was on a dive where there was a large shark near one of the parts of the Farne Islands.
Really?
There were a couple of photographers who I think they're from Holland, and the lady came up and she said, I can't believe I saw a shark. And I think everyone was like, yes, I'm sure. You've probably just seen a seal in the distance. And then it was a regular dive club. It was the Deep Blue Pirates from Whitley Bay were up, who dive regularly. And one of the ladies there came up and said, "Yeah, that was a big shark," and I think I got it on camera. And we had a look at her GoPro, and you couldn't quite make out what it was, but it was a large shark. You could see this. There was a seal in the picture, obviously quite aware that the shark was there because it was looking at the shark. The shark was at least probably 6 foot long minimum.
Oh wow!
And we think the Shark Trust was sent the footage and things, and I think it was confirmed that it was either a poor beagle or a short fin mako.
Wow.
But yeah, quite a big shark. So I mean, I'm sure there are sharks around there, but we don't tend to see them very often. We don't tend to see some signs of shark predation around the islands. But it's not unbelievable to think it happens every now and again.
No, and I guess if there's that concentration of seals, if there are any that do, I don't think poor beagles. I think they're mainly fish eaters off the top of my head.
Fish eaters,
I guess,
yeah, mainly fish eaters.
But you never know. And any tuna yet? I know tuna are turning up everywhere. Are they showing it around there at all?
No, not heard of any tuna. I know they come on, bluefin are coming on, in numbers off Cornwall, and they've been filmed and things, but not yet. Hopefully, I think that may be associated with a bit of global warming. So let's hope it doesn't extend that far north.
No, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think there was a population historically in off Yorkshire, Scarborough. There was a big tunny fishery. So
yeah, that's right.
And
back
of course,
in the 30s and 40s, there was a lot of tuna fishing. If you Google, the old pictures of tuna fishing North Sea, you see these pictures of these old boys with, with these huge, enormous tuna, 8 foot long, massive, huge, big thing. But that got overfished. That was the problem.
That's right. I was chatting to a guy the other week about tuna, and he went tuna fishing last week, and he said they hooked 8, but they could only get 2 in, and they were 250 pounds, and they were small ones. And I was like, bloody, I don't think. I mean, they tagged them, so it's not. I mean, it's regulated now, so you can't just go fishing and you have to put them back. But they take measurements and put a tag in them. But I was just like, I'm not sure that appeals to me, to be honest. Getting something that big, I'd love to see one. Just to see a tuna would be amazing. Do you think the seals recognise you?
Yeah, they do. I mean, so people often say, "Oh, you must know the seals must know you, and you must know them, and they must reckon." It's very rare, Jack, that I dive with the same seal. It does happen every now and again, but there's 5,000. There's at least 5,000 seals use the Farne Islands, and people say, well, if they don't recognise you, how comes you get in and they always come up to you? I think what it is over the last 20 years, what they've done is they've taught me how to dive in a way that they find not intrusive and not threatening. So those techniques I can use with any seals that I haven't met before, and they'll still respond in the same way. So it isn't. I've dived off quite remote parts of Cornwall. I've dived off quite remote parts of Scotland, and exactly the same behaviour, using the same techniques. They still come up and touch me, and push their noses against my hand and stuff. So what I've been very lucky to do is be taught by the seals how to dive in a way that they're fine with, and that also gives me this quite unique access to observe behaviour and film behaviour, because they're not worried. They're not thinking, oh gosh, we need to keep away, or we can't do this here. So yeah, that's very occasionally if I've dived the same day, I've seen the same seal, and they take off where we sort of left off. So if we've been diving together for an hour or so, I then get out the water. When I go back in, it doesn't take I don't have the initial sort of preliminary period with them. They just take off where they left off, really.
I remember going out to the farms for you. Oh God, it was a long time ago now, because Rob Cuss was there as well, and we were heading to some little inlet, and you just started calling like a seal.
Yeah.
And they all came, and I was like, what are you doing? But they all came and were really interested. But it wasn't like it wasn't just, they weren't clambering off rocks or anything. They were just in the water, and they thought, oh, let's go and see Ben. But I just thought, he's talking to these bloody seals. But it worked. Yeah. They came up. It was incredible.
Yeah, they like vocalizations, and over the years I've learned a few things that vocalizations that they like. They're very inquisitive animals, and they use a vast repertoire of underwater vocalizations. And although my seal speak is pretty poor, I've figured a few things that they do like. So there are a few noises underwater that I use quite regularly, really, and they like that. They use a lot of vocalizations.
What, like low grumbles through the reg or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, one noise. You're going to make me do it now, aren't you? But one
Well, I
noise that,
was subtly edging that way.
yeah. So one noise that they do like is they like this. They like that noise,
Uh,
and that's a noise. That's a very poor copy of a noise that some of them bulls make um, underwater. And just by experimenting, I've sort of learned that noise seems to attract them to come closer. Don't ask me why. I haven't got a clue what it translates into in seal,
yeah.
but I've learned that one. I've learned that if there's from the outback, if you say cooey, that cooey is a cooey is a sound that travels a long way on above water.
Okay.
And I've tried using that underwater with some quite interesting results as well. So sometimes if they're a bit further away and I shout cooey in my regulator, that will attract them over. Not right up to me, but they'll be interested. Now, if I was to shout something else instead, I may get the same response. But cooey, I know it travels a long way above land, which is why it was sort of designed, and it seems to get a reasonable response underwater. But when they get close, then that noise
Yeah.
always seems to be interesting.
That's what seems to work. I've had friends who've gone in with cetaceans and they've said like singing, they come in to investigate. Who was it? Bertie Gregory was telling me about belugas and he was singing Adele. I can't remember which Adele song it was, but the belugas, because they're holding the note and they were really interested and they came right
Yeah.
up to.
I think that, especially you're in an animal that uses acoustic signaling and vocalizations for communication. So I think they're hearing underwater. A seal's hearing above the water is about the same as you and I. We can hear up to about 20 kilohertz, but underwater seals can hear to a higher frequency. They can probably hear up to about 70 kilohertz.
Wow.
It's a bit complicated why. It's to do with the weight of the ear ossicle bones being heavier and being able to move more with vibrations underwater. But they live in an environment where sound is really important.
Yeah, yeah. Is there a grey seal fact that, I mean, obviously you've rattled off so many already, but is there one fact about them that particularly amazes you?
Oh wow, gosh. I think that I'm always amazed by the sensitivity of their whiskers, of their vibrissae,
Okay.
and I think we still probably have a lot to learn about that in terms of their ability. So there was some research that was done at Rostock University in Germany by a guy called Hanke, and that basically was indicating that seals could pick up using just their whiskers. They could pick up what's called the hydrodynamic trail off the back of fish. So basically, like a boat would leave a wake, as the fish swims, as its tail goes through the water, it moves the water particles and leaves this trail, which is a little bit like a wake behind a boat. Now, the seal's whiskers can pick up on that hydrodynamic trail over 100 meters away.
Wow.
And it can do that while it's moving through the water. So while it's moving through the water, as it's moving through the water, usually the whiskers would be abducted and out at sort of 90 degrees to the face. Because it's moving through a medium that's relatively thick, dense, the whiskers will vibrate. That's another very interesting thing, because the whiskers are so designed to reduce vortices behind the whiskers. So places like MIT in America have looked at that to look at any applications of that design to reduce flow and vortices around structures in water. So a seal's whiskers are not like a straight drinking tube, they're undulated. And that undulation, as they move through the water, reduces vortices behind the whisker. So they can pick up the hydrodynamic trail off a fish 100 meters away. So if you can, while they're going through the water, so imagine the sensitivity. They got thousands of neurons to innovate those whiskers. So you can imagine if something is so sensitive that it can pick up the minute vibrations of fish's wake 100 meters away. That's incredible sensitivity. But they then can come up and touch me with those same whiskers on my face. So
Yeah.
I can only conclude by that they must be able to turn off the sensitivity or turn off switch them off or switch them on or reduce the sensitivity. Because if they were functioning at that very high level of sensitivity, enough to pick up minute movements in water, and they then came along and pushed them against my face, you'd think that would give them like an overload of information.
Be too much, yeah.
So I think they have the ability to turn them off, turn up the gain. And I also think, having seen them, they do this funny thing where they come along with their whiskers sometimes, and they come in front of me, and then they vibrate them. And I wonder whether they have not only a passive ability to sort of sense vibrations, movement in the water, but I wonder if they have an active ability where they can use where they can vibrate them and get some sort of feedback. But no one knows that really.
And I guess that would explain how they can feed in places, say like the Wash in Lincolnshire, where the water's just like chocolate. They're not using their eyes, are they?
No, definitely not.
So that,
maybe in the last few seconds.
Yeah.
But they have some quite incredible senses. They can, they've got their whiskers that can pick up these ridiculous vibrations. They have the ability to smell a chemical in the water, which is associated with areas of high productivity. So when phytoplankton get eaten by zooplankton, they produce a chemical called dimethyl sulfide. And that dimethyl sulfide goes into the water, and at the air-water interface, so at the top of where the sea is, meeting the air, there'll be a level of dimethyl sulfide. And the more grazing by zooplankton on the phytoplankton, the higher the level of dimethyl sulfide at the air-water interface.
Wow.
Now, the seals can smell dimethyl sulfide in incredibly low concentrations. So they could sort of sit on the rock and go, smells good over that direction, let's head there.
Crazy. Yeah.
And they can also taste incredibly small differences in salinity. Around the concentration of seawater either side, very, very minute differences that may be associated again with areas of high productivity. So if you've got upwelling and colder water coming up, and you may have tiny differences in salinity that they will then associate it with higher areas of productivity. So they can sort of taste the water with their tongue and go, yep, that saltiness looks good. They can smell when they get to the surface and go, it smells good over there, there's dimethyl sulfide. And then as they get closer, they can switch to whiskers and actually start to pick up things to hunt. So I've seen totally blind seals have plots.
Wow. That's mental, isn't it? That's absolutely incredible with them. And I'm forgetting, you'll probably know the percentage better than me, but isn't it something like the UK's got, is it 70% of the world's grey seals? Or we've got a high... Just over 40% of the
40.
Okay, I was a bit high there, but we've got a good percentage.
About maybe 360,000 in the world, I think, something like that, about 140,000 in around the UK, something like that.
So it's a good amount, but I wondered what kind of threats do grey seals face, and in particular threats in the UK, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth keeping in mind at the end of the day, Jack, that there's more African elephants in the world than there are grey seals.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, there's more African elephants than grey seals, so we really need to, protect what we have as a heritage, really, as a treasure around our coast. Obviously, a lot of it's off Scotland, but certain sites around our coast, really are a wildlife treasure, really, for these animals that are, that we're very lucky to have. In terms of threats, you've got a variety of threats. You've got their natural threats, maybe like the odd orca that will take a seal, perhaps the odd shark offshore. And then far more worrying to them are the threats of pollution, whether that's discarded or lost fishing equipment, whether that's chemicals in the marine environment, PVCs, things like that. So PCBs and, any chemicals that, organic pollutants that can go into the food chain, that can go through the things that they're eating and accumulating, whether they're heavy metals or organic solvents that are, dangerous to them. So you've got chemical pollutants, you've got the physical pollution of ropes and fishing kit, and you've got acoustic pollution as well, from things like pile driving for offshore turbines can damage them, and some other marine pollutions. Just noise can affect them as well.
Yeah, they've got a lot, like many other wildlife, I suppose.
Yeah, and then of course at some places you've got people shooting seals, around places like seal farms. Instead of using proven deterrents like double netting, tension netting, you've got people using, guns to shoot them.
Yeah, on the salmon
And
farms and
that's,
things.
yeah, on salmon
Yeah,
farms and things. And even
yeah.
I've even heard rumors of like drowning traps and things being deployed around
Oh
some of those
God.
areas.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me, to be honest with you. Have you had any interactions with common seals? Because obviously grey seals ironically, grey seals are more common, I suppose. But do you ever see those on the farms?
Yeah, I've never seen them at the farms. I think that they're quite dominant in terms of their behavior, the grey seals. I have dived with them, common seals, harbour seals up off Scotland. They're not as vocal underwater, in actual fact, but they were also inquisitive. And interestingly, they behaved in a not dissimilar manner in terms of their response to my body language. So I'll use certain maneuvers underwater that I know will interest seals. So I may use my hand like this underwater to
Yeah.
generate. I think what's happening there is I'm generating a wake and they're picking up with it with their whiskers, and then they'll come in on my hand and I'll switch from this to this, and they'll then put their noses up against my nose, up against my hand. And common seals will do the same. Although I don't dive with them that often, when I have dived with them up in Scotland, they behave very, very similar. Slightly more shy,
Yeah.
and definitely not as vocal underwater from what I could hear.
Because you barely see any pictures or video. Like grey seals are pretty obliging, really, aren't they? But common seals, you barely see any images of them underwater or video for whatever reason. But it's interesting you say that they are curious, and maybe just people aren't trying, or I don't know, there just doesn't seem to be as
I
much
think if you
media
look
on.
at the sites where people dive, where you do get that sort of cross overlap between people water using and common seals, there aren't that many places that I know where you get that overlap. But if you look off the coast of Wales, there's dive sites with seals. Off the Northumberland coast, you've got dive sites with seals. Off Scotland, you've got a number of dive sites with seals. When you look at common, I mean, I know I have filmed common seals, down in the sort of Tees area, Middlesbrough area. They've got a colony down there, but there is no water sports really down that way. And off Scotland, where I dived with common seals, it was just literally an island that wouldn't regularly be dived. It was just a rocky outcrop, and I just asked the skipper to drop me in for a bit there. So I just don't. I think it's probably because there just isn't very much overlapping use of the environment, really.
No, that makes sense. And talking of other pinnipeds, there was a walrus recently, wasn't there, as well in sea
Yeah, I
houses?
mean, part of me's thinking, God, I wish I'd gone up, because I was there on the Saturday, and on the Sunday it turned up. And I was looking after my oldest daughter, and I said, "Look, do you want to have a drive up and see it?" And she was like, "No, Daddy, I think I just want to do this, and then we'll go for a run." So we didn't drive, but I think the other thing that was sort of in the back of my head is that because people had found out where it was, I think there was an awful lot of people going, and I,
Yeah.
and I sort of didn't want to be one of the sort of people causing any way in disturbing it. So that was also sort of in my head. But yeah, fantastic thing to see. Amazing, really. I think I would love to have seen that in the water. That would have been
I bet, yeah, that
fascinating.
would have woken you up a bit.
Yeah, they can eat seals actually. So
Yeah,
yeah,
Doug Allen was telling me about this. Yeah, does
yeah,
it
they
suck the brain
can.
out or something?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they have amazing suction power, and they can suck, mollusks out their shells, and they can suck flesh off the bone with seals and things. Yeah.
Jesus, because he said one grabbed him, and he ended up punching this walrus in the face because it tried to get him, or it held him anyway. Whether it was going to eat him, I don't know. And then it sort of shook itself off and buggered off. But that
I
that
would
would
hope that my underwater moves would have maybe calmed the walrus rather than made it want to eat me. But yeah, it would have certainly been an interesting spot. You never know. You never know what you're going to see in the farms.
well, it was a because I think that walrus wasn't the same one as the famous one that was around all year. It was a different one, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a famous one called that they called Wally, that had gone
That's it.
down and around and ended up in the Scillies sinking some boats because it was so heavy. And then there
Yeah.
was another one that they thought this was probably called Freya, that
Uh,
had that was a female, and it had a slight wound to its front flipper. So I think they were relatively sure with its identification,
okay.
a younger female. But hopefully it's headed up north again.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, in some ways, yeah, it's an amazing sight to see, but slightly worrying as well. You have to think why walrus is turning up now, and You know, we could
Yeah,
make
you
all
do
kinds
have
of
to
links with,
think that. Yeah, why are walruses here? Yeah.
you know, links with climate
Having
change.
said that, a couple of years ago, we had two beluga whales off Warkworth Beach near where I work in Humble.
Really?
Two beluga whales, yeah, filmed just heading up the coast. So you never know really what's out there. We've seen sunfish.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There's William Schill who I always dive with. They had a humpback whale.
Yeah. Keep
You
you
just never
guessing.
know what's going to be up there. So
Well,
that's half the joy.
Well, exactly. And it's important to say that you're not just the seal man and you do work with other species. And one of those,
Yeah,
of course, is white-beaked dolphins. So I thought
yeah.
before we go, I'll quickly mention those and why the Northumberland population is so significant.
Yeah, I mean, white-beaked dolphin, it's been a bit disappointing me over the last few years because I work under license from the Marine Management Organization, and as a visiting researcher at Newcastle University, that I study them, um, and we just haven't been able to do any work really over the last couple of years because of the pandemic. But I think for the public, it's quite interesting to think that the most abundant dolphin in the North Sea is actually white-beaked dolphin. The most abundant cetacean is porpoise, but the
Yeah.
most abundant dolphin is white-beaked dolphin. Yet most people never even heard of them
No.
because they're offshore species, really. Interestingly, there's some papers that would indicate a temperature partitioning between white-beaked dolphin and common dolphin. So where the water's regularly colder than 13 degrees, you tend to see white-beaks. Where it's warmer than 13 degrees, you tend to see common, because they eat the same stuff. So they have this sort of unofficial temperature partitioning. Colder, there's white beaks, warmer. And before we came to a close because of the pandemic, we were starting to see an increasing number of common dolphin in that area, which we'd never seen before. Having done it for a long time, 10, 8, 9 years, the dolphins. We started to see common dolphin, and we do wonder if that was a bad sign, really, in terms of an indicator of slight warming with the sort of boundary of the common dolphin coming further north, and maybe pushing the white beaks a little bit further north as well.
Because white beaks are bigger, aren't they? Are they quite a large dolphin?
They are, yeah. They grow up to about 350 kilograms. 3 meters long. They are a really big, robust, subarctic temperate water dolphin. The most amazing dolphin I've ever been in the water with. And I've been in the water with a lot of dolphin species, including orca. I mean, orca probably just nearly tip it, but the they do. There's a possibility that the common are heading further north. We've just never seen it before. We actually saw them feeding together at one point, which is really
Okay.
unusual. But we'll just hopefully we'll get out again next year and just start to see what's going on out there in the Farne Deeps.
Because you see common dolphins around the west coast, but maybe that's the Gulf Stream warming the water. The North
Yeah,
Sea is
it's the
generally
Gulf
cool.
Stream warming the water. So
Right.
with common dolphin, you tend to see them in numbers around the south coast, Cornwall, Devon, up
Yeah.
the west coast where the Gulf Stream is. But you don't tend to get them, coming up the east coast like that into the North Sea in those numbers.
Okay. Okay.
So we'll just see how that unfolds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all interesting stuff. Well, look, Ben, I appreciate you coming on and having a chat. It's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Jack.
Take care, mate.
All the best, mate.
That was Ben Burville, absolutely full of facts about grey seals. That was incredible. The whiskers, I did not know anything about that. No idea how sensitive a grey seal's whiskers were. Now, this is normally the bit where I plug the social media for the podcast, although I expect you're probably already following it if you're this deep into this podcast hole. But if you're not following myself, my own personal social media is Jack Perks Photo over at Twitter, Jack Perks Wildlife Media on Facebook, Fish Twitcher on Instagram, and on YouTube it's Jack Perks Wildlife Media. And once I have my kind of break from the podcast, I'm going to be doing more stuff on YouTube, so it's well worth subscribing to that, and you'll see some kind of new visual content on the YouTube channel. Now, next week, I've got wildlife and fish artist David Miller, another good friend of mine. We're both fish botherers. We've worked together over the years many times. His artwork is absolutely incredible. So we talk a little bit about what got him into painting. Is painting fish difficult? And some of the other wildlife art that he's done. It's going to be a great conversation. This has been the Bearded Tits podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Cheers.